The nurse's words hit me like ice water. 3 days, she said, checking her clipboard. You've been here 3 days, Mrs. Collins. My son drugged me, stole my house, and left me here to rot. Now he's about to learn what happens when you corner a woman who taught high school for 40 years. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. Let me take you back to how this nightmare began. Because honey, you're going to want to know every twisted detail. I'm Margaret Collins, but everyone calls me Maggie. 65 years old, widow of 38 years, retired English teacher, and apparently the world's biggest fool. At least that's what I thought 3 days ago when I woke up in Riverside Psychiatric Facility, wearing a hospital gown, and wondering why my mouth tasted like chalk. The room was sterile white with bars on the windows. Real bars. Not the decorative kind you see on fancy houses, but the thick steel kind that scream, "You're not leaving anytime soon." My head felt like it was stuffed with cotton, and my hands shook when I tried to sit up. That's when Nurse Patricia walked in with her clipboard and her practiced smile. "Good morning, Margaret. How are we feeling today?" I wanted to ask, "Are you the one who feels like you've been hit by a truck? I need to call my son." I managed to croak out, "There's been a mistake." Patricia's smile faltered just a bit. "Your son is the one who brought you here, dear. He was very concerned about your episodes." Episodes? What episodes? I'd been perfectly fine 3 days ago. I remember making dinner, watching the news, taking my evening walk around the neighborhood like I had every night for 30 years. The only episode one could remember was discovering that my checking account was missing $15,000. But I'd planned to discuss that with David in the morning. "I want to leave," I said, throwing back the thin hospital blanket. "Oh, sweetie, that's not possible right now. Your son has filed a petition for temporary guardianship. He's worried about your mental state." The words came at me like a punch to the stomach. Guardianship. Mental state. I'd written lesson plans for teenagers for 4 decades. I'd balanced my checkbooks to the penny every month since 1985. I'd been driving myself to doctor's appointments, grocery shopping, and maintaining a 2-story house without help from anyone. "Where are my clothes?" I demanded in the closet. "But Mrs. Collins, you really should rest. The doctor will want to see you later today." I stood up on shaky legs and walked to the small closet. My blue cardigan, the one David's wife, Emma, had given me last Christmas, hung there, looking as confused as I felt. My purse was nowhere to be seen. My purse. Where's my purse? Your son took it for safekeeping. He thought it might upset you to worry about those things right now. Those things like my driver's license, my credit cards, and the key to the house I'd lived in for 35 years. That's when the fog in my brain started to clear, and the pieces began falling into place like a horrifying jigsaw puzzle. The missing money, David's sudden visits over the past month, his questions about my will, my insurance policies, my investment accounts, his insistence that I needed help managing my finances, and Emma, sweet, helpful Emma, who'd been bringing me homemade cookies twice a week for the past month. Cookies I'd eaten gratefully, never noticing the slightly bitter aftertaste that I'd attributed to too much vanilla. I sat back down on the bed, my mind racing. If David had filed for guardianship, he would have access to everything. My bank accounts, my house, my life savings. The man I'd raised, fed, clothed, and put through college had drugged me and locked me away so he could steal everything I'd worked for. But here's the thing about teaching teenagers for 40 years. You learn to spot a con artist from 50 feet away. Patricia was still hovering in the doorway when I looked up at her with my sweetest grandmother's smile. "Nurse Patricia, would you mind terribly bringing me a phone? I'd like to call my lawyer." The color drained from her face faster than water down a sink. "Your lawyer?" Patricia's voice pitched higher than a dog whistle. "Mrs. Collins, perhaps you should speak with Dr. Morrison first. He's very good at helping patients work through their concerns. Concerns as if being kidnapped and robbed by your own child was something you work through in therapy instead of criminal court." "Oh, I'm sure Dr. Morrison is lovely," I said, maintaining my teacher voice, the one that could make football players apologize for chewing gum. "But I'm quite certain my attorney will be even more helpful in this particular situation." Patricia fidgeted with her clipboard. "Let me check with the supervisor about phone privileges." Phone privileges? Like I was a teenager who'd missed curfew. After she left, I sat on the edge of that narrow bed and did what I'd done every day for the past 30 years. I made a plan. Step 1, get out of this place. Step 2, find out exactly what David had done. Step 3, make him regret the day he decided his mother was an easy target. The door opened again, but this time it wasn't Patricia. A tall man in a white coat strode in with the confidence of someone who'd never been challenged by a 65-year-old woman with nothing left to lose. Mrs. Collins, I'm Dr. Morrison. Your son has told me quite a bit about your recent behavior. Has he now? I folded my hands in my lap. And what exactly did my devoted son tell you? Dr. Morrison consulted his chart. Paranoid delusions about money being stolen. Accusations against family members. Increasingly erratic behavior. He's very concerned. I almost laughed out loud. David had always been clever. I give him that. Turn the victim into the villain. Make the crime look like a symptom. Doctor, may I ask you something? How long have you been practicing medicine? He straightened his tie. 15 years. Wonderful. In those 15 years, how many patients have you treated who claimed their money was being stolen? Mrs. Collins, financial paranoia is quite common in patients your age. How many turned out to be right? That stopped him cold. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Because I taught high school English for 40 years, doctor, do you know what that means? It means I've read thousands of essays where teenagers tried to convince me that their homework was eaten by dogs, their computers crashed at midnight, and their grandmothers died 12 times in one semester. I stood up and walked to the window, noting that we were on the 3rd floor. Not ideal for escaping, but good to know. It means I can spot a lie from across a crowded room. And my son, he's been lying to me for months. Dr. Morrison scribbled something on his chart. Mrs. Collins, I understand you're upset. Upset? I turned to face him. Doctor, if someone drugged you, kidnapped you, and locked you in a psychiatric facility so they could steal your life savings, would you call that being upset? No one has drugged you, Mrs. Collins. Your blood work shows what? That I had a sleeping aid in my system, the kind that dissolves easily in cookie frosting. For the first time, Dr. Morrison looked uncertain. Your daughter-in-law, Emma, has been bringing me homemade cookies twice a week for a month. Sweet girl, terrible baker. The cookies always had this weird, bitter taste, but I ate them anyway because I didn't want to hurt her feelings. I smiled. Funny how good manners almost got me robbed. Dr. Morrison was writing furiously now. Here's what I suggest, doctor. You run a proper toxicology screening on my blood. Not the standard panel you probably ran when I arrived, but a comprehensive one that looks for all the creative ways someone might dose a trusting old woman. I walked back to the bed and sat down, smoothing my hospital gown. And while we're waiting for those results, maybe you should ask yourself why a woman with no history of mental illness, no family history of dementia, and no previous episodes of paranoia would suddenly start having delusions at the exact same time her checking account started hemorrhaging money. The color was slowly draining from Dr. Morrison's face. Because if I were you, doctor, I'd be very careful about helping someone commit elder abuse. The state board tends to frown on that sort of thing. He cleared his throat. I'll order the extended toxicology panel. Thank you. And doctor, I'd like that phone call now. After he left, I allowed myself one small smile. David had made a classic mistake. He'd underestimated his target. But then again, he'd always been too busy to pay attention in my classes. The phone call changed everything. Not because my lawyer, William Henderson, was particularly surprised. Apparently, he'd been fielding calls about suspicious guardianship cases for years. What surprised him was the speed with which David had moved. Maggie, the paperwork was filed yesterday morning. Someone's been planning this for months. I sat in the visitor's room where they'd finally allowed me to make my call, wearing my own clothes again, thanks to William's immediate intervention. Turns out lawyers have a funny way of making hospital administrators remember patients' rights. How long do I have? I asked. The hearing is scheduled for next week. But Maggie, there's something else. David's already started liquidating your assets. My hand tightened on the phone. What do you mean? He put your house on the market this morning. Listed it as a quick sale. 20% below market value. The room started spinning. My house. The place where I'd raised David. Where Harold and I had shared 35 years of marriage, where every room held memories I wasn't ready to sell. Can he do that? If the guardianship goes through, yes, but there's something that doesn't add up, Maggie. The paperwork shows he's claiming you've been incompetent for 6 months. That means he would have needed medical documentation going back. Dr. Peterson, I breathed. Who? My family doctor. David insisted I start seeing him 3 months ago. Said my regular doctor was too old, that I needed someone more current with geriatric care. William was quiet for a moment. Maggie, I think we need to have a serious conversation about how deep this goes. 2 hours later, I was sitting in William's office, no longer a psychiatric patient, but not yet a free woman either. The temporary guardianship order was still in effect, which meant David had legal control over my life until next week's hearing. The good news, William said, spreading documents across his desk, is that Dr. Morrison ran that comprehensive toxicology panel. You had enough lorazepam in your system to sedate a horse. Lorazepam, anti-anxiety medication, dissolves easily in food, causes confusion, memory problems, and disorientation. Perfect for someone trying to build a case that you're losing your mental faculties. I stared at the lab results. How long would someone have to dose me to make it look convincing? Based on these levels, at least 6 weeks, probably longer. Emma's twice-weekly cookie visits suddenly made perfect sense. Sweet, helpful Emma, with her apologetic smile and her terrible baking skills. How he used to climb into my lap when thunderstorms scared him. How proud I'd been when he graduated college. When he got married. Let's let him keep thinking that. I dialed David's number before William could object. Mom. David's voice was carefully controlled. How are you feeling? Oh, sweetheart. I'm so confused. The doctors say I've been sick, but I don't remember being sick. I could hear the relief in his voice. Mom, you've been having some memory problems. Emma and I have been worried about you. Have we? That's terrible, David. They're saying I can come home now, but I need you to pick me up. I don't think I should drive. Of course, Mom. I'll be right there. After I hung up, William was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. You're going to confront him. I'm going to let him think he's won. And while he's celebrating, I'm going to find out exactly how much of my life he's already stolen. But first, I had one more call to make. The number I dialed belonged to my neighbor, Helen Watkins, who'd been living next door for 15 years and had the nosiness of a professional gossip columnist. If anything unusual had been happening at my house, Helen would know about it. Margaret. Oh, honey, I've been so worried about you. Emma told me you were in the hospital. Emma had been busy, apparently. I'm much better now. Helen, listen. I was wondering, has everything been quiet at the house while I've been away? Well, not exactly. There have been so many people coming and going. Emma's been there every day. And yesterday there was a real estate agent taking photos. My stomach clenched. A real estate agent. Oh yes. Lovely young woman with a measuring tape and one of those fancy cameras. She told me your family was helping you downsize. Said you decided the house was too much for you to manage alone. I gripped the phone tighter. Did Emma happen to mention where I'd be living instead? Some nice retirement community in Arizona, she said. Warmer weather. More activities for seniors. She made it sound wonderful. Arizona, of course. 3 states away from anyone who might ask inconvenient questions. Helen, this might sound strange, but have you noticed anything odd about Emma lately? Or David? There was a pause. Well, now that you mention it, Emma did seem nervous yesterday. She was loading boxes into her car from your house. And when I asked if she needed help, she nearly jumped out of her skin. Boxes? My belongings were already being packed up and distributed. What kind of boxes? Hard to say from this distance, but they looked heavy. Maybe books. You always did have all those books. My books. 40 years of collecting first editions. Signed copies. Literature textbooks I'd used for decades. Each one carefully chosen, lovingly maintained, irreplaceable. Helen, I need to ask you a favor. Could you keep an eye on the house for me? Maybe take note of anyone who comes and goes. Of course, dear. Though I have to say, Emma mentioned you might be confused when you got home, said the doctors were concerned about your memory. The setup was even more thorough than I'd imagined. Emma had been preparing the neighbors for my confused behavior, making sure that if I tried to tell anyone what was really happening, they'd already been conditioned to dismiss it as the ramblings of a sick old woman. I'll keep that in mind. Thank you, Helen. I hung up just as David walked into the hospital lobby. He looked tired, stressed, but when he saw me, his face transformed into an expression of concerned love that would have won him an Oscar. "Mom, you look so much better." I let him hug me, fighting the urge to push him away. His embrace felt like a snake coiling around its prey. "I feel better, sweetheart. Though I have to admit, everything's been so confusing lately." "That's what the doctors said. They think you might be more comfortable in a place with more support." "Oh, David, I just want to go home. I miss my house." Something flickered across his face. Guilt maybe, or calculation. "We'll figure all that out, Mom. For now, let's just focus on getting you settled." During the car ride home, David kept up a steady stream of gentle conversation designed to reinforce the narrative that I was fragile and confused. He asked if I remembered taking my medications, whether I'd been eating regularly, if I was having trouble sleeping. Each question was a test, and I failed them all beautifully. "I don't really remember," I said to each one, watching his shoulders relax incrementally. When we pulled into my driveway, I gasped. There was a for sale sign on my front lawn. Bright red letters announcing that my life was being auctioned off to the highest bidder. "David, why is there a sign on our lawn?" "Mom, we talked about this. Remember? You said the house was getting too big for you." I pressed my fingers to my temples, playing the confused old woman perfectly. "Did I? I don't remember saying that. Don't worry about it right now. Let's just get you inside." But as we walked up the front steps, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The lock on my front door had been changed. David pulled out a shiny new key, and I realized that if I had actually been confused, if I had really been suffering from dementia, I wouldn't be able to enter my own home without his permission. The trap was already sprung. I just hadn't been caught in it yet. Once inside, the full scope of their betrayal became clear. Half my furniture was gone. The antique dining set Harold had inherited from his grandmother gone. The china cabinet with my mother's dishes empty. My bookshelves, which yesterday had been filled with 40 years of carefully curated literature, now held only a few paperback novels. Where are my books? The question slipped out before I could stop it. David exchanged a glance with Emma, who had appeared from the kitchen wearing rubber gloves and carrying a box. "Mom, you said you wanted to donate them. Remember, you said they were just collecting dust." But I could see the truth in their faces. They hadn't donated my books. They'd sold them. Probably to used bookstore dealers who paid cash and didn't ask questions about providence. That's when I understood the full magnitude of what they'd done. This wasn't just theft. It was a razor. They weren't just stealing my money and my house. They were stealing my history, my identity, everything that made me who I was. And they were doing it systematically, methodically, with the kind of careful planning that suggested they'd done this before. Emma disappeared into the kitchen with her box, and I heard the telltale sounds of drawers being opened and closed. She was packing up my kitchen supplies, the good knives, the copper pots I'd collected over decades. Probably my mother's silver service, too. "I should probably lie down," I told David, maintaining my confused elderly woman act. "I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed." "Of course, Mom. Why don't you rest in your room for a while? Emma and I will take care of everything down here." My room. As if I were a guest in my own house. I climbed the stairs slowly, partly for effect, and partly because I was genuinely exhausted from the emotional roller coaster of the past few hours. But as soon as I reached the second floor, I understood why they'd been so eager to get me out of the way. My bedroom had been transformed into a staging area for their operation. Boxes lined the walls, each one labeled in Emma's neat handwriting. "Books sell, china, storage, jewelry, appraise, linens, donate." They'd cataloged my entire life like inventory at an estate sale. I walked to my dresser and opened the top drawer, empty. My jewelry box, which had sat in the same spot for 30 years, was gone. Harold's watch, my grandmother's pearl necklace, the diamond earrings I'd worn on my wedding day. All of it vanished. But it was the box labeled photos trash that nearly brought me to my knees. Inside were hundreds of family pictures spanning 6 decades. Harold and me on our honeymoon, David's first steps, Christmas mornings, birthday parties, graduations, vacations, every precious memory I'd carefully preserved, labeled trash by the people who appeared in half of them. I sat on my bed, which was now the only piece of furniture left in the room, and tried to process the scope of their betrayal. This wasn't opportunistic crime. This was systematic destruction carried out over months with military precision. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Mrs. Collins, this is Nancy from Premier Real Estate. We have several interested buyers for your property. Could we schedule showings for this afternoon? They'd already started showing the house to buyers. While I was locked in a psychiatric facility, strangers had been walking through my home, evaluating my life, making offers on my memories. I heard footsteps on the stairs and quickly shoved the phone under my pillow. Mom. David's voice carried a note of artificial concern. How are you feeling? A little better, David. Could you sit with me for a minute? He perched on the edge of the bed, close enough that I could see the guilt wearing with greed in his eyes. Sweetheart, I've been thinking about what you said about the house being too big for me. His posture straightened slightly. Yes, maybe you're right. Maybe I should consider moving somewhere with more support. The relief that washed over his face was almost comical. I'm so glad you're thinking about it, Mom. Emma and I have been researching some really nice places in Arizona. He couldn't quite hide his surprise. How did you? Helen mentioned it when I called her. She said Emma told her about a lovely retirement community there. Oh, right. Yes, it's supposed to be beautiful. Year-round sunshine, lots of activities, and far from here. Well, yes, but Mom, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes a fresh start is exactly what a person needs, a fresh start. What a lovely way to describe being exiled from your own life. David, can I ask you something? Of course. The money that's been missing from my checking account. Do you know anything about that? For a split second, his mask slipped. I saw panic flash across his features before he recovered. Mom, you've been confused about the finances lately. Emma's been helping you pay bills, remember? Sometimes you forget you've written checks. $15,000 worth of checks. It sounds like a lot, but when you add up all the monthly expenses, he was good. I give him that. If I had actually been suffering from dementia, his explanation would have been perfectly plausible. Memory problems would explain the missing money, the confusion about selling the house, the disorientation about Arizona retirement communities. You're probably right, I said, giving him a grateful smile. I'm so lucky to have you and Emma looking out for me. He squeezed my hand and I fought the urge to recoil. We love you, Mom. We just want what's best for you. After he left, I sat in that empty room surrounded by boxes of my stolen life and made a decision. They thought they were dealing with a confused old woman who would go quietly into exile while they divided up her assets. They were about to learn the difference between confused and furious. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. Detective Sarah Martinez had been one of my students 15 years ago. A shy girl who'd blossomed into a confident woman with a badge and a deep sense of justice. If David wanted to play games with his mother's life, it was time he learned that some lessons come with handcuffs. But first I needed evidence, and I knew exactly where to find it. Detective Sarah Martinez arrived at my house 20 minutes after I called her, dressed in civilian clothes and carrying what looked like a social visit coffee cup. Smart girl. I always knew she'd go far. Mrs. Collins, she said, giving me a careful hug. I was so sorry to hear you'd been unwell. The word unwell carried just enough emphasis to let me know she'd done her homework before arriving. Sarah had always been thorough, even as a 16-year-old writing essays about social justice. Sara, Diar, Komein. I've missed you. We settled in my living room, or what was left of it. Sarah's trained eyes swept over the half-empty space, cataloging the missing furniture and packed boxes like evidence at a crime scene. Mrs. Collins, when you called, you mentioned some concerns about your recent hospitalization. I did indeed. I pulled out my phone and showed her the text from the real estate agent. Tell me, Sarah, in your professional opinion, is it normal for someone to list their house for sale while they're unconscious in a psychiatric facility? Her jaw tightened as she read. No, ma'am, it's not. I thought not. And would you say it's normal for family members to pack up and sell someone's belongings while they're receiving medical treatment? Mrs. Collins, are you saying you didn't consent to any of this? I'm saying I was drugged, kidnapped, and robbed by my own son, and I have the lab results to prove it. I handed her the toxicology report William had given me. Sarah read it twice, her expression growing darker with each line. This level of Layaraza, Mrs. Collins, this could have killed you, but it didn't. And now I need to figure out exactly how far this conspiracy goes. Sarah set down her coffee cup. What do you mean? Think about it, dear. David couldn't have done this alone. He needed a doctor to sign commitment papers, a hospital to accept them, lawyers to file guardianship documents. This isn't a one-person operation. I walked to the window and pointed toward Dr. Peterson's office building, visible 3 blocks away. 3 months ago, David insisted I switch doctors, said my old physician was behind the times. Dr. Peterson has seen me exactly 4 times, and somehow he was comfortable declaring me mentally incompetent. That's concerning. It's criminal. And I suspect if we dig deeper, we'll find Dr. Peterson has a history of conveniently diagnosing elderly patients as incompetent. Right before their family's petition for guardianship, Sarah was taking notes now, her pen moving rapidly across her small notepad. Mrs. Collins, I have to ask, do you have somewhere safe to stay? If your suspicions are correct, you could be in danger. Before I could answer, I heard the front door open. David's voice carried from the hallway. Mom, I brought dinner. Sarah and I exchanged glances. That's my cue to be the confused old woman again, I whispered. Play along. When David entered the living room carrying bags from my favorite Chinese restaurant, his step faltered slightly at seeing Sarah. Oh, I didn't realize you had company. David, you remember Sarah Martinez. She was one of my students. Of course. David's smile was perfectly calibrated. Warm but not offensive. How nice to see you again. I heard Mrs. Collins had been under the weather, Sarah said, watching him carefully. I wanted to check on her. That's very thoughtful. Mom's been having some memory issues lately, but she's much better now. Memory issues. Sarah's voice carried just the right note of concern. Nothing serious, I hope. The doctors think it might be early-stage dementia. We're exploring some living situations that might be more appropriate. There it was. The lie delivered smoothly to a police officer. Sarah's expression didn't change, but I caught the slight tightening around her eyes. How frightening for your family, Sarah said. Mrs. Collins seems very sharp to me, though. She has good days and bad days. Well, I'm sure you're taking excellent care of her. After David excused himself to set up dinner in the kitchen, Sarah leaned close to me. Mrs. Collins, he just lied to a police officer about your medical condition. That's a crime. Add it to the list, dear. But we need more than lies. We need documentation. What are you thinking? I glanced toward the kitchen, where I could hear David and Emma discussing which boxes to load into their car tonight. I'm thinking it's time to visit Dr. Peterson's office. After hours, of course. Sarah's eyes widened. Mrs. Collins, I cannot and will not participate in breaking and entering. Of course not. You're a law enforcement officer with a sterling reputation. I smiled sweetly. But I'm just a confused old woman who might accidentally wander into the wrong building while looking for the pharmacy. At 3 o'clock in the morning, Dr. Peterson's office building stood dark against the November sky. The security was minimal. A keypad lock on the front door, and basic alarm system that probably hadn't been updated since the Clinton administration. Good thing I'd spent 30 years chaperoning high school field trips and learning exactly how creative teenagers could be when properly motivated. Sarah sat in her car across the street, officially there to make sure I didn't hurt myself during my confused wandering. Unofficially, she was providing backup in case my amateur detective work went sideways. The building directory listed Dr. Peterson's office on the 3rd floor. The elevator required a key card after hours, but the stairwell door opened with a satisfying click when I applied the credit card technique I'd learned from my most enterprising students. Dr. Peterson's waiting room looked like every other medical office. Beige walls, uncomfortable chairs, and magazines from 2019. But his private office told a different story. The desk was expensive mahogany, the kind that screamed success. Framed diplomas covered one wall along with photos of Dr. Peterson shaking hands with important-looking people. And there in the center of it all was something that made my blood run cold. A framed newspaper clipping local doctor helps families navigate difficult guardianship decisions. The article dated 6 months ago featured Drive Peterson discussing the challenges of diagnosing dementia in elderly patients. He was quoted extensively about the importance of family involvement in medical decisions, and the need for creative solutions when traditional support systems weren't adequate. Creative solutions like drugging patients and declaring them incompetent. I photographed the article with my phone, then turned my attention to the filing cabinets. They were locked, but apparently Dr. Peterson had never dealt with a high school teacher who'd confiscated more contraband than a customs agent. The files were organized by year, then alphabetically by last name. I found mine quickly, a folder thick enough to choke a horse, considering he'd only seen me 4 times. The documents inside made my hands shake with rage. Medical assessments dating back 6 months before I'd ever met Drive S. Peterson. Detailed notes about my supposed cognitive decline, my increasing paranoia, my inability to manage my finances, all fiction, all carefully crafted to support David's guardianship petition. But it was the last document that stopped my heart, an invoice addressed to David Collins. Professional consultation services, $15,000. Guardianship documentation and testimony, $25,000. Additional services as needed, $10,000. $50,000. David had paid Dr. Peterson $50,000 to destroy my life. I photographed every page, my hands steadying as anger replaced shock. These weren't medical records. They were forgeries created to order for a client willing to pay premium prices for custom-made evidence. A sound in the hallway made me freeze. Footsteps moving slowly but deliberately toward the office. I quickly closed the file cabinet and looked around for an escape route. The window faced the back alley, 3 stories up. Not ideal, but better than being caught rifling through medical files. I grabbed the newspaper clipping from the wall. Original evidence would carry more weight than photographs. And headed for the window. The footsteps stopped outside the office door. I heard the distinct sound of keys jingling. Dr. Peterson was here at 3 o'clock in the morning, which meant either he was the most dedicated physician in history, or someone had told him his office might receive an unexpected visitor tonight. The key turned in the lock just as I managed to get the window open. November air hit me like a slap, but the fire escape was solid under my feet. I climbed down as quickly as my 65-year-old joints would allow, the newspaper clipping tucked safely in my jacket pocket. By the time Dr. Peterson's office light came on, I was crossing the street towards Sarah's car. "How did it go?" she asked as I slipped into the passenger seat. I handed her my phone, scrolling through the photographs I'd taken. "It went perfectly. We just caught a doctor red-handed in a conspiracy to commit elder abuse." Sarah studied the images, her expression growing grimmer with each swipe. "Mrs. Collins, this is organized crime. They've done this before." I had the same thought, which makes me wonder, how many other families has Dr. Peterson helped with their creative solutions? "We need to contact the district attorney's office immediately." "Not yet." I buckled my seatbelt as Sarah started the car. "First, I want to know who tipped off Dr. Peterson that his office might be searched tonight." Sarah glanced at me as we pulled away from the curb. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking David's been watching me more carefully than I realized. And I'm thinking it's time to find out exactly who else is involved in this conspiracy. But first I had a phone call to make." At 6 o'clock in the morning, I called David from Sarah's guest room where I'd spent what little remained of the night. "Mom, where are you? I came by to check on you this morning and you weren't there." "Perfect." He'd been monitoring my movements just as I'd suspected. "Oh, sweetheart. I'm at Sarah Martinez's house. You remember Sarah? She was one of my students. I got confused last night and couldn't remember how to work the new door locks." The relief in David's voice was audible. "Mom, why don't I come pick you up? We can have breakfast together." "That would be lovely. But David, could you bring Emma? I'd like to talk to both of you about something important." "Of course. What about I've been thinking about what you said about Arizona about starting fresh." There was a pause. Then David's voice came back carefully controlled. "Really? I think you might be right. This house is too big and I've been so confused lately. Maybe I do need more help." "Mom, that's wonderful. Emma will be so relieved." "Relieved? Not happy. Not excited for my well-being. Relieved. There's just one thing I need to do first. I want to update my will." The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. "Your will?" "Well, yes. If I'm moving to Arizona, I should make sure everything is properly arranged. I'd like you and Emma to inherit the house immediately, so you don't have to worry about maintaining it while I'm gone." I could practically hear the gears turning in David's head. If I signed over the house before the guardianship hearing, he wouldn't need the court order. He'd have everything he wanted without the legal complications. Mom, you don't need to worry about that right now. But I do worry, sweetheart. I've been having so many memory problems lately. What if something happens to me and I haven't taken care of these details? Hook, line, and sinker. Okay, if it would make you feel better, should I call William Henderson? Actually, I was thinking of using someone new, someone who specializes in estate planning for seniors with memory issues. Another pause. Do you have someone in mind? Emma mentioned a lawyer she knew. Someone who's very understanding about these situations. I hadn't mentioned any such thing, but I was gambling that David and Emma had researched lawyers who would be cooperative with their plans. Oh right. Richard Blackwood. Yes, he's supposed to be excellent. Bingo. Another conspirator. Perfect. Could you set up an appointment for this afternoon? I'd like to get this settled as soon as possible. After I hung up, Sarah shook her head in amazement. You're going to walk into a lawyer's office where they're planning to help you sign away your assets. I'm going to walk into a lawyer's office wired for sound and accompanied by a police detective. Mrs. Collins, you can't officially investigate without probable cause. But you can accompany a concerned citizen who's asked for your help navigating a complex legal situation. Sarah poured herself another cup of coffee. What makes you think this Richard Blackwood is involved? Because David knew exactly who I was talking about when I mentioned Emma's lawyer recommendation. That suggests prior discussion, prior planning. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos from Dr. Peterson's office. Look at the dates on these fake medical assessments. They go back 6 months. That means David has been planning this since last spring. You don't spend 6 months planning elder abuse without lining up all your support team in advance. So we're talking about a conspiracy involving your son, your daughter-in-law, a doctor, and a lawyer at minimum. And I suspect if we dig deeper, we'll find this isn't their first time. My phone rang. David again. Mom, good news. Richard Blackwood can see you at 2 this afternoon. He's very excited to help you get your affairs in order. I'll bet he is. That's wonderful, dear. Should I meet you there? Actually, Emma and I thought we'd pick you up. We want to make sure you don't get confused about the address. Of course they did. They wanted to control every aspect of the meeting, make sure I arrived in the right frame of mind, confused, dependent, grateful for their guidance. Perfect. I'll be ready. After I hung up, I looked at Sarah. Detective Martinez, would you be interested in attending a very interesting legal consultation this afternoon? What do you have in mind? I'm thinking it's time to let David and his friends show us exactly how their operation works from the inside. But first, I had one more call to make to someone who'd been conspicuously absent from this entire situation. My daughter Jennifer, who lived in Portland and hadn't spoken to her brother in 2 years. It was time to find out why. Jennifer picked up on the second ring, her voice sharp with worry. Mom. Oh my God. I've been trying to reach you for 3 days. David told me you were in the hospital, but when I called, they said you'd been discharged. 3 days. She'd been trying to reach me for 3 days, which meant she knew something was wrong. Jennifer, where are you calling from? The Portland airport. I'm flying home right now. Mom, I need to tell you something about David. Something I should have told you years ago. My hands started shaking. What kind of something? He did this before to Emma's grandmother. The world tilted sideways. What? 3 years ago, right before they got married, Emma's grandmother Eleanor started having memory problems. David convinced Emma that Eleanor needed professional care, helped her find a doctor who diagnosed dementia, got her moved to a memory care facility. I sat down hard in Sarah's kitchen chair. Sarah was watching me intently, clearly picking up on the gravity of the conversation. Eleanor died 6 months later. Jennifer continued. Natural causes, the death certificate said. But she'd been healthy as a horse before the diagnosis. And after she died, Emma inherited her entire estate, $200,000, plus Eleanor's house. Jennifer, why didn't you tell me this before? Because I couldn't prove anything. And because David threatened me. Threatened you how? He said if I ever repeated my crazy theories about Eleanor's death, he'd make sure everyone knew about my drinking problem. He said he'd have me declared an unfit mother and take custody of the kids. Jennifer had struggled with alcohol after her divorce, but she'd been sober for 5 years. The threat was real enough to keep her quiet. especially with 2 young children to protect. Mom, when David called to tell me you were sick, he asked about your will. He wanted to know if you'd left everything to him, or if it was split between us. What did you tell him? I told him I didn't know. But Mom, the way he asked, it was like he was calculating something. I thought about the fake medical records, the premature house sale, the systematic stripping of my belongings. Jennifer, I need you to do something for me. When you land, don't come to the house. Meet me at Sarah Martinez's address instead. I gave her Sarah's address and hung up, then turned to look at the detective. We're not dealing with opportunistic thieves, I said. We're dealing with serial killers. Sarah's face went pale. Mrs. Collins, they killed Emma's grandmother, and they were planning to kill me. The lorazepam overdose wasn't supposed to make me confused. It was supposed to stop my heart and make it look like natural causes. I pulled out my phone and called William Henderson. William, I need you to check something for me. I need to know if Dr. Peterson has signed death certificates for any elderly patients who died shortly after being diagnosed with dementia. Maggie, what are you thinking? I'm thinking we need to expand our investigation beyond elder abuse. I think we're looking at murder. 2 hours later, William called back with information that confirmed my worst fears. Maggie, Dr. Peterson has signed death certificates for 7 elderly patients in the past 3 years. All of them died within 6 months of being diagnosed with dementia. All of them had family members who inherited substantial assets. All of them. Every single one. And here's the kicker. 3 of those families used the same estate planning attorney. Richard Blackwood. Richard Blackwood. I looked at Sarah, who had been listening to my side of the conversation with growing alarm. Detective Martinez, I think it's time to call in some backup because at 2 o'clock this afternoon, I'm walking into the office of a man who's helped kill at least 7 people. Mrs. Collins, absolutely not. We're calling the FBI right now. No, my voice was steel. If we call in federal agents now, they'll scatter like cockroaches. David and Emma will disappear. Dr. Peterson will destroy his records. And Blackwood will claim he was just following his client's instructions. So what are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we give them exactly what they want. One more confused old woman, ready to sign away her life. I smiled grimly. The only difference is this time their victim will be wearing a wire and surrounded by law enforcement officers. But there was something else I needed to know first. Something that would determine whether we were dealing with a criminal conspiracy or something even darker. Sarah, I need you to run a background check on someone for me. Who? Emma Collins. I want to know everything about her family history. Especially how many elderly relatives she's had who died unexpectedly. Because if my suspicions were correct, we weren't dealing with criminals who'd stumbled into murder. We were dealing with people who turned killing elderly relatives into a family business. Emma's background check revealed the horrifying scope of their operation. In the past 5 years, she had lost 4 elderly relatives to sudden dementia. Her grandmother Eleanor, her great-aunt Ruth, her grandfather's sister Margaret, and a family friend named Dorothy, who had named Emma as her heir. For elderly women, for quick dementia diagnosis, for convenient deaths, for inheritances totaling nearly $800,000. David and Emma weren't just thieves. They were professional killers who specialized in murdering elderly women for their assets. At 1:45 p.m. I sat in the passenger seat of Sarah's unmarked police car, wearing a wire and surrounded by backup officers positioned throughout the building. The plan was simple. Get them to confess to their crimes on tape, then arrest them for conspiracy to commit murder. What I didn't expect was for them to be stupid enough to discuss their previous victims while driving to the lawyer's office. The recording device in your purse picked up everything, Detective Martinez told me. David and Emma spent 20 minutes comparing notes about how to handle you versus how they handled the others. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Richard Blackwood's office occupied the entire top floor of a downtown high-rise. All marble and mahogany and the kind of understated wealth that comes from helping people steal inheritance money. Blackwood himself was exactly what I'd expected. Silver-haired, expensive suit, warm smile that never reached his eyes. Mrs. Collins, it's such a pleasure to meet you. David and Emma have told me so much about your situation. My situation, like being drugged and robbed, was a weather condition. They've been so helpful, I said, letting my voice quaver slightly. I don't know what I'd do without them. Family is so important, Blackwood agreed, gesturing for us to sit in the leather chairs arranged around his conference table, especially when we're dealing with challenging circumstances. The documents he spread before me were works of art in their own twisted way. A new will leaving everything to David and Emma. A power of attorney giving them complete control over my finances. A healthcare directive allowing them to make all medical decisions on my behalf. Everything they needed to legally steal my assets and ensure I never lived long enough to complain about it. Now, Mrs. Collins, Blackwood said, his voice taking on the carefully modulated tone of someone speaking to a confused child. These documents will ensure that your family can take care of you properly. Take care of me? Well, yes. Given your recent health issues, it's important that David and Emma have the legal authority to make decisions when you're not able to do so yourself. Emma leaned forward, her face a mask of concern. Mom, we just want to make sure you're protected. Protected like a lamb being protected by wolves. Of course, dear, you've been so good to me. Those cookies you brought were delicious. Emma's smile flickered for just a moment. I'm glad you enjoyed them. What was your secret ingredient? They had such an interesting aftertaste. David and Emma exchanged glances. Blackwood cleared his throat. Mrs. Collins, should we review these documents? But I wasn't finished. Emma, you must have learned your baking skills from your grandmother. I would have loved to meet her. She passed away a few years ago. How sad. What did she die of? Another glance between David and Emma. This time David answered. Dementia. It was very sudden. How terrible. Just like your Aunt Ruth, I imagine. Emma went very still. How do you know about Aunt Ruth? Oh, I've been thinking so much about family lately. About how some families seem to have such bad luck with elderly relatives developing sudden memory problems. Blackwood was watching me now with the intensity of a snake eyeing a mouse. Mrs. Collins, perhaps we should focus on 4 relatives in 5 years. I continued conversationally. That's really quite remarkable, don't you think? Almost like you have a gift for helping elderly family members transition to the next life. The silence in the room was deafening. David spoke first, his voice carefully controlled. Mom, I think you're getting confused again. Am I? Or am I finally seeing clearly for the first time in months? I reached into my purse and pulled out the newspaper clipping I'd taken from Dr. Peterson's office. Creative solutions for difficult guardianship decisions. That's what Dr. Peterson calls it, isn't it? Though I think murder for profit is more accurate. Emma shot to her feet. We should go. She's having one of her episodes. Sit down, Emma. The voice that filled the room wasn't mine. It was Detective Sarah Martinez standing in the doorway with her badge visible, and her hand resting on her service weapon. Nobody's going anywhere. The next few minutes were a blur of Miranda, handcuffs, and the satisfying sight of 3 people realizing their carefully planned operation had just collapsed around them. But it was David's words as they led him away that I'll never forget. You were supposed to die, Mom. That last batch of cookies had enough lorazepam to stop your heart. If you hadn't missed dinner that night, if I hadn't missed dinner, if I hadn't been running late from my book club meeting, if I hadn't decided to grab a sandwich instead of eating Emma's poisoned cookies, pure luck had saved my life. 6 months later, I sat in a federal courthouse listening to the judge sentence David Collins, Emma Collins, Dr. Peterson, and Richard Blackwood to life in prison without the possibility of parole. They'd been convicted on multiple counts of murder, conspiracy, elder abuse, and fraud. The investigation had uncovered 11 victims in total. 11 elderly people who died so their relatives could inherit their assets. As I walked out of the courthouse, a reporter asked me how it felt to see justice served. It feels like closing a chapter, I told her. But not the book. Because the truth is there are David and Emma Collinses in every city targeting elderly people who society sees as vulnerable and disposable. There are Dr. Petersons willing to falsify medical records for the right price. There are Richard Blackwoods ready to help families steal inheritances through legal loopholes. The real victory wasn't sending 4 criminals to prison. The real victory was proving that underestimating a sharp old woman is the kind of mistake that ruins your entire life. I'm 66 now, living in my own house, managing my own affairs, and serving on a task force that investigates elder abuse. I speak at conferences about recognizing the warning signs, about fighting back when someone tries to steal your life. And every time I tell my story, I end with the same message. Don't let anyone convince you that age makes you powerless. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one they mistake for helpless. Now, where are you watching from today? Have you ever had to fight for what was rightfully yours? Share your story in the comments below. And don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, because the best defense against predators is a community that watches out for each other. And this community, we don't let anyone steal from family. Not on our watch. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.